5/16 of an inch thickness of stock you're working with. Right there you've got about, what is that, maybe 3/16 of an inch into the vertical piece. You can see the line here where the lamination was, where the grain pattern changes. That means in the angle I've cut into this piece about, in fact, one, two, three, four. It is 1/8 of an inch. And that's usually about right. If it's a little more, don't panic. If it's a little less, don't panic. But I like it about 1/8 of an inch. The next thing would be to sand the vertical piece. And again, I'm sanding it right in its own alignment. I'm sanding it vertically. And I like to sand from all different angles. Top, front, back. The reason I like to do it from all four sides is in case it isn't absolutely perfectly balanced, you're going to have high and low spots. You want to be able to hit that from all sides, and I just find you get a better degree of sanding if you sand from all sides. That pretty much is done now. I've gotten rid of all the sand marks. The glue line's gone. Now this top piece I'm going to do last. Right now I'm going to concentrate on doing this vertical neck piece here, and that one you can't, because it's an inside curve, you can't sand flat. So I'm immediately going to go into sanding the inside or concave curvature. And as I do that, it's going to be picking up the sanding on the top piece. So I say don't do the top piece till last, because a lot of it will already be done from doing the neck piece. Should have a mask on, even with a fan. Don't be afraid to feel it occasionally. A tactile sensation is very helpful when you're working with a lathe. The other thing is don't be afraid to stop it as much as you feel necessary to see how it's progressing. Like right here, you can see it's sanding smoothly, but there are still some spots where it hasn't quite sanded evenly, where the glue line's still showing. So just keep working it. Trying to keep that, don't stay stagnant in one area. Try to keep a moving sand belt going. Then naturally that curvature will start taking place. The amazing thing about this glue also is that in 2 hours time, clamping time, it's ready to be put back on here and do some serious work to it, whereas most glues need 24 hours before you do any kind of work to it where it's going to be exposed to pressure. The other thing is that you generate a tremendous amount of heat from this sanding sequence. A lot of glues will lose their bonding strength, including your cyanoacrylic glues, your aliphatic resin glues, which are your yellow glues, your epoxies, your resorcinol glues. I've tried them all. I've never had success. You get total or partial glue failure, which is just not acceptable, which means that as you sand it, you have to keep stopping for long periods to let it cool off. See, I don't have to with this. I can just keep going. You still don't want to heat it up red hot, but this wood is a nice wood to sand. If it's a very hard wood, like say Purple Heart, stop occasionally, because that wood you'll need to sand more, and it will get pretty hot. And even this glue, if it got too hot. As you can see, I've got a nice curve there. And when I get done, can hold this vertically. I think I can point it out, and I think you'll be able to see it. I've also, by just the nature of working the inside vertical neck piece, I've gotten the curvature and the sanding already done on the top piece here. I'm just going to now do that a little bit. There, that's pretty well done as far as that goes. So now what I want to do is round this off to get a nice, kind of at the end result, you want a nice kind of French curve to it. So there the vertical ring is joined. You got those two kind of edges, and you want to just soften those up. So you just concentrate your sanding on those edges. Okay, I've got the nice graceful curve. This is going to be shaped a little further with a tool in a little while to get even a more dramatic curve there and get a little bit smaller base to it. But for now, I've got the outside sanded, and I've got a nice curvature to it. The next thing I want to do is work the inside, but before I do that, I want to take the sand belt and just round off the top edge, which eventually is going to be rounded off anyhow. I like to do it at this point because you start working the inside, that edge can be sharp and you don't want to cut your hands. So before you start working the inside, make sure you've got this rounded off. This is what I use the little pieces of sand belt. All I do is when I get a used piece of sand belt that's really losing its effectiveness, I don't throw them away. I save them and then tear them up into small strips like this, and it makes it easy to use for interior work like this. And I always like to use two at a time because if you use just one, your fingers are going to cook real fast from the friction. With two of them, you seem to have more insulating ability there, and you can get a little more work done before you have to pull your hand out. So what I'm doing really is guiding it and putting the pressure on with my forefinger and middle finger on them and holding it with my thumb. And I don't sand this completely like I will see. Now that just slipped out from under. I just get my fingers out of there real quick and pull the sandpaper back out. Go back in. If it's a bowl, then you worry about doing the inside a little bit more. But this is a vase, and you just want to do it really enough so that for visibility, if someone's looking at the top of it and they see some of the inside, you don't want a bunch of rough edges with glue lines. So I don't do it as refined as I would the inside of a bowl, but I do it to even it up. And then what I do is sand the vertical neck piece. And again, now on the inside, it's an outside angle, so I can sand it straight across. And every once in a while, check it to see how it's progressing. Now it looks like it's pretty good shape right there. Now I'll do the top piece. Try to keep even pressure on it, and if anything, concentrate on the lower, say 7/8 of that ring. The very top portion, try to minimize your sanding. You want a nice, thick, even ring for appearance sake. And so most of my pressure is being concentrated more on the middle and lower section of it until I get the cut mark away and glue line and everything. It looks pretty well done like that. Now I can just even it off, sand it completely, make sure the upper edge is nice and smooth. And the last thing is now to, again, round it off. So the edges on the inside of the vertical ring, you're just trying to cut away to get that nice gradual curve to it. But again, most things are common sense. You don't feel it when it's first mounted on there, when you have all the glue in that, because your piece is not sanded at that point, and it's very coarse, and that can cut you up. So initially when it's mounted, obviously you're not going to touch it, not until you start sanding it a little bit. And sometimes I like to do it just to feel out how hot it's getting. And now you stop it, look, now that looks good. And I got a nice even thickness on the outside. Now what I'm going to do is, because I was sanding there, that edge has become a little bit sharpened again, so I'm going to, from different angles, again round that off, and then the outside portion do a little bit more to that. Okay, now we're ready to do the tooling down at the base piece. And to do that, we need a tool rest mount. And this is an optional item that comes with the Ringmaster. The same hole that the swivel plate was taken out of, you take the bolt, you just use the same one to attach the tool rest. And then just loosen the nut, slide it forward to get closer to the work, about like that. So tighten that and tighten the nut attaching the tool rest, or steady rest as it's called. Get the scraper, and I like to use a scraper as opposed to a skew or a gouge or anything like that. For this type of work, all you want to do is scrape the work, and I hold it against the tool rest and just guide the tool. Let the tool do the work and hold it probably with a handle up from the horizontal. I dip it down a little bit into the wood. Start it out real lightly, and as it's shaping, you can increase pressure, but you don't want to dig in it too much. You can jam it into the piece. Just let the tool do the work. As you can see, it doesn't take long to shape the piece. And I don't want a real drastic cut. I think we'll find that this will be sufficient. All we have to do now is remove the steady rest. And slide this back out of the way, tighten it, go back to the 36 grit belt, and just finish sanding that smooth. We're using a scraper tool. A lot of times you can tear the grain a little bit, so you want to make sure it's sanded adequately to get rid of any grain tear in it. Stop it occasionally and look, and it won't take you long to be able to spot grain tear. Now that's, it turned out real good. No grain tear in it, or what little there was I've sanded away already. And I want to, when I'm doing that, I'm bringing that angle in tighter, but I also want to keep the overall flow of the vase, the angle of the vase. It's like a French curve, and you want to keep a nice gradual curvature to it. And to do that, the easiest way is not to look at any of the vase itself, but only the outer edge of it. And sometimes it's helpful if you hold a piece of white paper or cardboard behind it and just look at the outer curvature and see if it's got a nice, interesting, graceful curve to it. Next step is to go on and progress through the grits. The next grit would be from a 36 grit. This is a 50 grit sand belt. Again, aluminum oxide. Just completely go over the whole thing. And I'm not going to go through all the grits in the interest of time and redundancy, but you're pretty much going through the whole thing from different angles. Trying to keep in mind most of the pressure at the very top you want to minimize so that you don't get a real thin top to it. You want it to be interesting, not too fragile looking. And then do a little there, a little on the inside.